to the live forum for Helen's Garden Festival. My name's Tamsin Westhorpe, and I am here with the most wonderful, lively, lovely set of experts, and we're going to be covering the subject, the very large subject of gardening for the planet. So we won't cover it all, no one ever could, but we're going to give it our best shot, and we're going to have some fun doing it as we go. So let me introduce you first of all to the lady of the group, Hannah Gender, garden designer. Hannah, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Oh, okay. I have a history with Helen's. I've been involved with Helen's for quite a few years now with the garden festival, and have the great honour of doing a new garden here, which we'll be building this year. My passion for the planet, really, and for growing food, I think particularly comes from a childhood in Somerset, growing up on a small holding. My parents did the whole sort of back to nature, grew all our own food, had a bit too much goat's milk, but other than that, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And Terry, king of vegetables, really. Everyone knows lovely Terry Walton. Terry, tell us a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about myself. Like Hannah, I have a long history with Helen's. I think I've been here since the very first show, and that goes back about 14 or 15 years. Gail managed to persuade me to come along when busy schedule, and once you got Gail, she got you forever. So I've been here, and most of my life I'm the man that's heard but rarely seen. So my voice is known, but my stature is not very often. That is changing rapidly since lockdown, because everybody wants to garden, and suddenly the television stations want to be in on the act, and I now got a regular slot almost once a week on This Morning. So again, you get to see me as well as hear me now, and it's great preaching this religion of gardening, because it is a religion, because once it's got you, it takes over your life. And the planet has always been important to me. I was a born again, and I'm probably the oldest of this generation here. I was a born again organic gardener way back in the middle of last century. That's how long I've been gardening organically. And it's very important to me, because I think the planet needs all the help it can get. We can see what's happening. If you've been gardening for the decades I've been gardening, there was always 4 seasons. You knew what to do. The books were good. The seed packets meant something. That has all changed. We now don't seem to get a season. They all roll into one. The weather can be completely changeable. It can be absolutely boiling like it was this year in April. We get a long dry spell, and then the weather breaks when it should be good and dry, and we get storms. I've never known a year where the wind has blown so much. So the planet really needs the gardener's help. And how little you do or how much you do doesn't really matter. It all helps. We have to take control ourselves. Don't say it's somebody else's problem. Don't rely on these politicians. They won't do it. We can.
Very wise words from Terry. And last but definitely not least is John Cunningham. So John, tell us a bit about yourself.
Good afternoon. Okay, my name's John Cunningham. I'm a Scottish gardener. I work in Gloucestershire at the moment and all the shires thereabout. I didn't have the idyllic youth and childhood that the other people have. I was born in Scotland, born in Glasgow, where trees were in fact firewood. So I had no real recollection. They were just for running up and setting fire. So I didn't have any of that. And then I moved. In fact, I went to Edinburgh. I'm not going to give you the story of my life, but I went to, after being an engineer, I went to a local authority, and then I went to the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh and fell in love over Cotoneaster horizontalis, which was my very first. How will I ever learn that? How will I learn these names?
Yeah.
And then I get to know the first thing I learned, the best thing I ever learned was someone said to me, the plant doesn't know its own name, so don't worry. And so I stopped worrying about that. And then I moved to London, did a little bit there, moved to Gloucestershire, fell in love with Gloucestershire. It's a beautiful place. And I'm now in Herefordshire, which is a stone's throw. And here I am sitting in front of you now.
Wonderful. Well, as you can see, we've got a lot of expertise here. If you want to ask a question, please do via the YouTube. Now, I've written a list of all the topics we could potentially cover. So just to sort of tell you how vast this subject is, it's climate change, it's flooding, it's planting trees, it's pollinators, it's pesticides, it's biological control, it's educating kids, it's lockdown attitude. So we've got a lot to squeeze into an hour. So I'm going to start by reading out one of our first questions, and we'll see if we can give them a really good answer. So, Jill from Malvern has asked, which plants can cope with dry heat and torrential rain? I would just like to say that we have to remember that plants are, well, you know, we can't expect them to be miracle workers. They've all got personalities like us. There's certain things we can't do, and the same is for plants. So, Hannah, what would you suggest as a good plant?
Oh, that's interesting. I think the main thing about plants is what very few of them like is sitting in wet and then getting cold. So because we're getting a lot of flooding now, I think that's what I would be aware of in the garden, that actually to add some drainage, particularly under most plants will not like being wet and cold. When I started out, 25, 30 years ago, we wouldn't plant penstemons outside. We can now because we've got much milder winters. So I would go for those sort of plants. I go for penstemons. If you want it, if you've got very dry conditions, any of the herbs, there's a clue in the leaf. Often a silver-leafed plant that's reflecting the light is really good in very dry conditions. So that gives you a massive range from the lavenders, all the herbs, and echinops. All sorts of stuff, really. You've got a big choice.
I'm smiling because behind Hannah it's starting to pour with rain. So here we go. This is typical. John, what would you pick? I mean, there isn't a plant that can cope with being baked by the heat and sitting in water. It's just, there aren't plants like that, are there?
There aren't really. I mean, the thing to do is one of the joys about this all-encompassing hobby, or in my case, a job, is researching. You research, you go on holiday, you look at the plants that grow in that particular climate. I, for instance, wouldn't plant any more willows. I've stopped planting willows not because of the water, but because when they dry out, they really dry out and they just don't like it. Very, very few plants because plants can't move. They're not motile, they cannot move. Therefore, they're stuck. And if you put them in the wrong position, poor drainage, for a Mediterranean plant. I mean, I water my lavenders too much. Really, they'd sit in gravel and scree at the bottom of a mountain and, in the Mediterranean and live a perfectly happy life, but not the way I would like it. I want the perfect plant and all that. So we do adapt our conditions, but the important thing is to research the plant you're going to put in that position and see if it grows in a hot country or in the shade or whatever, and make that adapt, because the world is changing now.
Yeah. And Terry, what about edibles? Is there anything you can leave on your wet Welsh allotment?
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, they do all survive. Some suffer more than others. I mean, a lot of plants, particularly things that flower like runner beans, French beans, the heavy rain does knock the flowers off, keeps the bees away and doesn't help. But anything grown in the ground is a root crop, whether it be a parsnip, whether it be a carrot, particularly the beetroot, thrive in wet conditions because they got this long tapered root. It can go down, it can search for water if it's dry. If it's a bit wet, it doesn't really bother it too much. So most things, the only plant that really does suffer with the variation in temperature is the good old humble potato, which is a staple of our diet. Because if it's too wet, too humid, too hot, we get the dreaded blight, and that wipes out the potato immediately. But most things, other than that, will survive. And this year has been a classic, and the garden has never been so fruitful. The harvest has never been so good, even though we had the hot start, then a wet bit, and now we've had the humidity and a hot bit again. It has thrived and it's done really well. So they do adapt the same as we have to adapt, but we need to help them.
So after the many years you've been growing on your allotment, you are genuinely saying that the weather has changed. You've seen a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, you could guarantee when I was a lad, and that's a few years ago, that come the end of September, you'd have the first sharp frost of the winter. That would then put to bed everything which was summer. Then you'd everything converted to autumn growing and then planning for the spring. And come the spring, you could always guarantee by the end of March, things would start popping up. You knew the ground had warmed up. You knew you could start planting and things would start to take off. And then you remember the times in July and August when it was usually sunny, it was usually warm. We didn't have the things like blight. I don't remember blight as a lad because the summer was dry and everything grew well. And now that's I've seen it in December buds starting to open on fruit trees. How crazy is that? They should be dormant, they should be sitting there, they should be resting, they should wait for the first March sun. And this is what's happening. It's definitely changing.
Something that I think we should cover is recycling, upcycling. I mean, during lockdown, I think people have been amazing at using old tin cans for their seedlings, not heading out to shop as the first port of call. Are there any sort of recycling things, John, that you've started using at home?
I've certainly used all my buckets. And one thing I have learned is to put, I use less pots now. If I do use pots, I use bigger pots. I tried growing things like peppers and tomatoes in the smaller pots, and then found that I'd get blossom end rot. They would dry out, basically. They'd dry out in a day. And if you're out working, you'd come home and they dried out, you water them. You know, infrequent watering causes problems, so I'm going to use bigger pots. I found out last week, super cool. I went to look outside the drain. It was raining. I looked outside. I thought, I wonder if that's flooding, where it's going. And it turns out in my old house, 400 years old, that the drain goes straight into the ground. It dissipates like a French drain. And I have gravel driveways, so the whole thing seeps away. That's not contributing to flooding, you know, the roads with tarmac and all that. So that's obviously a thing is tarmac and concrete. There's a lot of it around. Gravel would be better depending on your driveway. So I have noticed that so I save much more water, and I'm much more frugal about watering plants at all. I'd rather plant them in the ground where nature can, and mulch, water and mulch. Yeah. And that works for me.
I think, Hannah, would you agree that people...
Yeah, I'm a big mulcher. big believer in mulch. But also, you know, from a design point of view, if I go and see a client, it's a bit like people with an attitude to have a new kitchen. They just want to take everything away. But if you look at it, often the paving that they've got has not been well laid. It could be laid better, reused. There's so many jobs where we reuse stuff now that, you know, you can talk the clients into it and say, look, we could reuse this section of paving, lay it properly, put this with it, and it'll look fantastic. Why throw it away?
Yeah, I think it's key that we start to make use of what we've got, most definitely.
Yeah.
Terry, on the allotment, what's your top recycling tip?
Anything. I mean, there's a great thing around the valleys where I live, as all the season allotmenteers, if they see a skip, that is paradise. Everything in a skip is useful to allotmenteer. If someone is doing something at their home, they fill the skip, 24 hours near our allotment, that skip is empty. There's a new greenhouse, there's a new shed, there's a new edge of the path, there are new pots.
Do you know, I just remember my first coal frame was a window frame on a skip. I'd forgotten
everything
all about that.
with a seasoned allotmenteer's eye, you can look in a skip and you can find use for everything. And again, nothing leaves the allotment. We don't use, once it's in the allotment, that's its life forever. It disintegrates. It all gets used to the ultimate. And everything on my plot, the plot gives, the plot gets it back. All the waste goes onto the compost heap. Even the vegetables that go home, all those peelings, all those offcuts go in a caddy, and all my worms feed on them, and that goes back into the soil. So nothing ever leaves, nothing's not used that cannot be recycled.
What goes on in the green stays in the, I understand. What goes on in the allotment stays in the allotment.
Yeah.
That's it.
But don't take it to the extremes I did. I decided to make a hammock out of an old curtain. So I tied it between some trees, all very exciting. I thought, this is fantastic. I've really nailed this. Get in it, lying there, and it starts to tear. And I drop to the ground. So, yes, you do have to take some recycling rather carefully. But it is a topic that I think we all need to look at, because with restaurants doing more takeout boxes, more takeout cups, how can we use those as gardeners? You know, can we grow our seedlings in these things? I mean, we've really got to think about that.
Definitely.
All stuff like anything which is cardboard or paper would go in perfectly. It's the perfect composting material. You want a mixture of greens and browns. So when you're getting green material, cardboard and paper works absolutely wonderful between them and assists the compost heap to work at its best.
Yeah, it so amazes me that people don't compost. It's just such an obvious thing. And also you're cutting the grass, the weeds that aren't flowering, obviously leaves and stuff, going in with your normal household waste. when you put that back in, it's almost local stuff going back in. It took me 7 years to get my compost heap just right. I don't use leaves in it. I don't use spent leaves from autumn leaves, and I have them separate because it's a different process, bacteria and that, rather than the worms. But it took me 7 years, and now I've got it. I love my compost. I use it rather than buy compost. I'll end up using
better
that
stuff.
compost.
I got a new name for my compost heap.
Oh, go on.
It's now called Amazon, because all the cardboard is coming out lately.
Right, do that too. That's
Brilliant. Now we've got another question here from Janet from Gloucester. She gardens on a balcony, so she's really tight on space, obviously. What steps should she take to be more planet friendly? So I think she's looking at introducing pollinators and insects. So Hannah, what would you suggest she should do?
Again, aspect is really key for plants. So most plants, if she's getting some sun during the day, there's lots of flowers that she can grow that'd be great for pollinators. Any green space is going to help. I think I read recently that, of 27 million gardeners, I think we cover an area in the whole country of something like 1 million acres. Right. And our gardens are bigger combined, even if you've got a tiny patch, are bigger than all of the national parks put together. So I think the message is, whatever you do that increases the biodiversity, i.e. is giving early nectar to plants, which you can do to bees, which you can do with bulbs, and late nectar, which you could do with asters or any of the late flowering plants, is valuable. Don't think that, I can't do anything about this, because we can, collectively, we can.
Brilliant. And I think it's amazing, wandering around a town in lockdown, seeing that people are utilising all their spaces. So front gardens is another thing on my list. So John, I think people have been using their front gardens more. It might be the only space they've got. They've got a car. What would you say to someone that thinks, well, I need a parking space? Is there a compromise to be had here?
First I would say, well, get rid of the caravan, which also clogs up your front garden, and then your car. There's an interesting fact that I read this morning that 25% of non-forest trees in the UK are in private gardens. 25%.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal amount. So people are using they're much more in tune with nature and the environment. They're much more involved in it than they actually realise. Front gardens, my garden, front garden, you can't park in it. It's hidden by a wall. But generally, I use gravel. I get rid of slabs and tarmac because they just channel the water away. I'd rather use gravel and then use the plants that suit that sort of condition. It's just another garden. If you're embarrassed about working outside, a lot of people don't like working in their front gardens, people staring at them. Apart from allotment people who are actually, they look for you to going past. But generally people are a bit nervous about it, but I wouldn't be nervous because, as we'll probably cover, for stress, it's the most relaxing hobby. I wouldn't get fanatical. We were talking earlier, just before the programme started, about people becoming fanatical. There's a weed on the lawn, dear, I can see it. I'm taking that out, which you do get a lot of. But front gardens, it's just the same as a back garden. It's got the same soil in it. You could put raised beds in it. You could do just as much as you do in the back, you could do in the front.
Yeah. Gosh, and Terry, I'm sure you've been really pleased to see people growing tomatoes in hanging baskets around the front door. Have you noticed that going on?
Oh yeah, it's a tremendous. There's been a major upsurge. It amazed me. 2 weeks ago was the first time I've been to a garden centre since March, and there wasn't a seed to be bought in the place. So everybody had gone out, and they all suddenly want to grow vegetables, and they are now finding the benefits of doing that. Helps them because they couldn't go to the supermarket so easily. Once they tasted their very first vegetable, they've grown themselves, they never want to go back to a supermarket again.
No.
Because it's the benefit. And people say, is organic important? Yes, it is to me. But the important things of growing your own is the freshness that you have when you pick it. You could pick that and eat it within hours. And you, by God, is that when the taste is at its best?
Absolutely. Well, we've got a question here. How do we get teenagers into gardening? From Green Kid, who I assume is a teenager. And during lockdown, my son has started to help me in the garden. He dug up the potatoes last night, peeled them. But, again, to Terry, is it something that the teenagers... Are you finding more teenagers helping on the allotment? Or what would... Because you started at a very young age, didn't you?
Well, I was 4-year-old when I first went to the allotment. My father was a seasoned allotmentier, he'd been there a long time. And I get to 4-year-old, my mother said, "Tom, take this kid in front of my feet. Take
Trying
him
to
over
get rid of you,
He's
you
going to
know.
get rid of me. My mother didn't really love me." So my father had a shed there, and he had a small square about the size of a carpet in front of a fire. And he turned that over, and he gave me a packet of radish seed, and he said, "Sow them." And I put them in, I raked this, and I put them in, and I was amazed. In 4 days, these big green leaves erupted through the soil. I was absolutely mesmerized at the fact that I'd put a small seed in, and in 4 days there was a big leaf. And 5 weeks later, he pulled out this red ball. He wiped it on his trousers, I remember that distinctly, and he gave it to me. This was before health and safety. He gave me that, and I bit into this radish, and boy, did that leave a taste in my mouth. And that really hooked me, and then he developed me into growing other things on this little patch. And at 11-year-old, I was so enamored with gardening, I took my first allotments. And this was allotments full of guys, because this was a male domain in those days. Age 65 and older, and there was this 11-year-old taking a plot, which is the size of a lawn tennis court. And they said, "He won't last." And they all stood back and watched. And 3 months later, this plot started to take shape. And they gave me 1.5 million years of information by the time I was 15.
Yes, it's such a lovely story, isn't it? It really is quite an overwhelming story. But Hannah, have you found any of your friends that are non-gardeners have started gardening during lockdown?
Yes, and even clients, that I thought, gosh, they would never be into growing vegetables, have suddenly asked me to incorporate veg in the garden that we've done for them. It's cool to be a chef now, isn't it? I think it's quite cool to be a gardener too, to grow veg and be able to cook it. I mean, if you've got somebody to impress, you're a teenager, you've got a girlfriend or a boyfriend to impress, what is better than cooking them this amazing meal with this fresh veg? And
Ferrari.
Oh, there you go. No,
John.
not for me.
But actually, it's the Instagram as well, isn't it? Because people want to take photos of things they've achieved and share them, and that's all really positive, isn't it?
Yeah.
So many handfuls of tomatoes I've seen on Instagram with people going, "Hooray, look what I've done."
Yeah.
So no, it's great. So I think we've just got to get them out there and encourage them, and do the cooking as well, so that the two come hand in hand.
And I think the other thing that Terry alluded to is the fact that he had his own plot. And he could choose what he wanted to grow. I think that's absolutely key. Grow what you love to eat, And
That's exactly what I was. It's exactly what I was going to. People sometimes get overwhelmed. I have this thing about plant names that people come up and say, what is the name of that, and they're blown away. So much so that they lose heart. Just grow things. Don't grow everything. Just don't grow everything. You won't eat it all for a start. Grow what you enjoy. Just start off with one thing or two things. See how that goes and get confident. Don't have a whole, don't get a book out and say, "This is what I'm doing, lasagna planting, everything's on top of everything else, we're going to be brilliant." And then it's a disaster. Start small and build. Not everybody's Terry.
No, but I was 4. I started
4,
small.
Yeah. Good call.
But the other thing, you agree with exactly what you say there, because people always, the first question you ever get asked when you ever do a show is, "What can I grow?" And that's not what you want to know, is what do you want to grow? Yeah. I tell a little quick story now. When about 6 years ago, I was planting some Brussels sprouts on my plot. And this young couple had taken a plot about 7 or 8 plots away. And they came on the road. They said, "What are you planting?" I said, "I'm planting sprouts." "Oh, they're lovely looking plants." And I thought they were sort of indicating they want a few.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, yeah, I got plenty there. Take 6 away." So they took them away, and off they went. And it was October. I remember they came back and they said, "Do you want some sprouts, Terry?" I said, "No, mine have done perfectly well. I've got plenty. Pick them and take them home." "Oh, we don't like them." So they nurtured these plants for 5 months, which they didn't like.
Yeah.
Excellent, I love that. Now we've got another veg question coming up here. How can you prepare a clay garden for veg? So that's from Natalie. So Terry, that's over to you, I think. If it's very heavy clay.
We were fortunate in some respects to have a clay garden, because clay is one of the best mediums for growing in once you've conquered it. But like everything else, it dries solid and it sticks to you when it's wet, so it's a difficult one. But it's just plenty of working in good, solid compost into it. And if you can get some fine grit, And you just need to do this for several years. And it's not going to be an instant solution, because clay does take a bit of working. But within 3 to 4 years of constantly working it, you have got the perfect medium, because it's now soft enough to grow. It's got all the nutrients a plant will need, and it takes a bit of patience as well.
Yeah. Wow. And good compost.
Yeah, and mulching,
compost. Yeah.
Absolutely mulching.
She's
because
selling this mulching, isn't
I am.
she?
I'm really into
mulch.
it.
What-
I'm
what-
seriously into
Miss
it.
Mulch.
What's mulching?
Because the fertility in the soil is just in those top few inches, you know. So if you're just planting into the top, and if you're putting cardboard down and then mulching on top, I mean, that's how I do my veggie garden. Is I do a no dig method. So I'm
Many
not
years,
digging.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
exactly the same. A few years ago, I met someone, Charles.
Dowding.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much, Terry. I met, and I realised that this was the way, because I was going into people's gardens as a professional gardener, and we were digging over the gardens and, you know, bastard trenching, the double dig method. It was a nightmare, but I remember doing it, and it was good training. But so now I built raised beds as soon as when I began courting my wife.
Good.
I thought I'll build her raised beds 4 feet wide. We can sit on it. She can reach in 2 feet each side. And we haven't, that's been 15 years now. I mean, the wood's rotten and I have to renew it. But we have never, and we just top dress it with our own compost.
Yeah.
And we've never touched it. And it's
Yeah.
all the worms are doing their own thing. All the oxygen's at the right level, all this sort of stuff. We're not compacting it. And it's been fabulous, actually. It's been really, really rewarding, a raised bed, which you could do in your front garden,
Yeah.
by the way.
But speaking of your lovely wife,
Oh, yeah.
we were talking earlier about battery-powered tools, weren't we? So this is something that's really quite good for the planet, is the development in mowers, petrol mowers, strimmers, all these types of things. So a lot of you have probably got a petrol strimmer, electric mower, but now you can buy battery, which is a lot easier to use. And I think you bought your wife, didn't you?
Last year at the Malvern Show, I was lucky enough to interview Tamsin, who was encouraging us to use, she used a blower. It was a still blower, other makes are available, but it was a still blower, a battery one, and my wife was in the audience. She was captivated by it and immediately demanded that we get one, so I got one for her, and then we got the mower 2 weeks later, and then we got the strimmer, and then we got the chainsaw. And I was looking yesterday at the hedge. This lady has cost me a fortune.
Love it.
But it's absolutely, do you know, it's really wonderful. I'm a professional gardener. All my kit is petrol. And I've only started now because the quality of the batteries. And unfortunately, for the planet, that's not a brilliant thing. But it is better than petrol. We're trying, you know, unless you're going to get 200 sheep in the back of your van to cut someone's grass for them for a couple of days and then take them away again. We're always going to have to give a bit back, and you know, and it's not ideal. But this battery thing, the quality of the batteries now. I was speaking to someone in the shop, and the percentage of battery powered equipment used by professionals even is going up and up.
And quieter? Is it much quieter?
Oh, it's much quieter. Well,
Yeah.
when you turn that engine off of that chainsaw, when I'm only going to use it for home use, I'm cut 6 pieces up, stop it, and the chainsaw stops. It's not chicken away. It's really good.
It is an advancement.
Yes.
But I mean, there is nothing better than looking at old techniques. I think this is what lockdown's done. It's brought new ideas, but also it's rewound us so that we use old techniques again. So things like scything is a lovely thing to do, is to scythe your wildflower meadow rather than trim it.
Your 1 acre meadow.
I know. I did that as a kid. We had to do that.
So did I. I mean,
Yeah.
I used to scythe the whole mountainside in the Rhondda for bracken to feed the ground.
Sort of Welsh pole dark. I can picture it now.
Oh, yes, that sounds,
I was like
that
Father
sounds
Time
brilliant.
up there for days.
Excellent. But you can hear the birds while you're doing it.
Yeah.
And it's just less invasive.
You won't get the earmuffs on with the music playing.
No, not yet. But and also push mowers. I know they're not the easiest thing, but if you're fanatical about your lawn, and once you get it to a certain state, you can use a manual push mower.
Lawns. Who's going to have lawns? Who's going to have lawns?
Well, I do love my lawn.
I love lawns too, but a wildflower area there could be. This is the way it's going. It's a very British, need I say, English thing, having a lawn. And I love lawns. It's the first thing we were told when you get into someone's garden, cut the grass, do the edges, it looks like you've been there for weeks, even though you haven't lifted a weed out. It's a wonderful thing. But is it the future?
Well, I mean, there's an amazing amount of pollinators that are attracted to wildflower meadows and areas of uncut grass. I don't know if any of you've got involved with the conservation, butterfly conservation, Big Count, which is sort of first week in August. And I wandered around my garden and was just overwhelmed by the butterflies. I think we've got 59 different types in the UK, and we've lost a couple in the last 100 years. Have you noticed, I mean, Hannah, have you noticed that people are asking for gardens that will attract butterflies and bees?
Definitely. And I think as well that what we're seeing is, you know, depending how old we are, we can remember. I can just about remember, you know, going down the garden and seeing a buddleia bush and seeing it covered in butterflies. And the only place that I've seen numbers like that again recently was a visit to southern Bulgaria, because it's an organic country. They've not been able to afford the pesticides. So you'd be walking through a forest and there'd be a puddle and there'd be 20 or 30 butterflies. Now, I'm a bit encouraged this year. I did the big butterfly count, and near me, I live near the canal, and there's a new moorings, and it's all wildflowers. And I thought, I'm going to go down there and see how many. And I think in 15 minutes, I got 22.
That's great.
Because you start to see the numbers. It's not just 1 or 2. You may be seeing 4 or 5. So, you know, the less pesticides we can use, the more we can leave the grass. Even if you just leave clover, if you don't want it this high, leave the clover in your lawn, because it'll get covered in bees. Absolutely covered in bees. So yeah, they need our help. I do think more and more that people are saying yes, they want stuff for wildlife. And my big message is, don't be too tidy. You know, if you've got a decent sized garden, leave a few woolly bits at the edges, leave the hedges to overgrow a bit, leave some nettles in.
I think we all quite like that advice, don't we? Hurrah! But Terry, you've probably got lots of butterflies on your patch. Are there lots of cabbage whites?
There seem to be a lot of cabbage.
There are,
This year is the super year of the cabbage white. I have never, ever seen so many. I don't know where all these pupas spent their winter, but by God, they've come out in force.
So what do you do?
I net it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I use barriers everywhere. Unfortunately, the allotments looks like a bit like a war zone at time, because I have a complete brassica net, and all my brassicas are in one place. I have a complete box for my carrots, which are under a complete enviromesh, and all my Swedes are grown in there. So you have to keep them at bay. I love flying them out, and despite this net, I don't know why, but every time I go there, 2 of them have found their way into this net.
Amazing.
And I go around, I check it, it is solid. They must have a set of needles, they must cut a hole, get in and sew it up again, because they're always in there. But even then, being a gardener, and then I know how destructive they can be to my brassicas, I carefully catch them and I let them go. Because they are, you know, they're a living creature. The idea of being a gardener is to respect all types of nature as well as protecting your plants.
Yeah.
There's no need to kill them because they're having to go. They're only doing what's natural. And I try to keep them at bay. And again, you have to put up with some destructiveness. You know, slugs and snails, again, will make a mess. But I don't actually go out and deliberately want to destroy them. I take them away and get rid of them in my own way.
Put them on the next plot.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's interesting you say that, because I was looking the other day about roses and the green fly that are on roses. And I unfortunately, a couple of years ago, I dropped my iPad. My iPad had a picture of every rose I put in my garden with a written description of where it was and the name of it. And I lost all of it. 2 years of photographs, not online, not on your cloud, nothing like that, lost. So I had to go round each rose. 186 roses I've got in my garden.
Wow.
Some of them named. Some of them had labels still on them. Some of them with a white label with that stuff that you were sure was an indelible Sharpie pen, and it's gone. 2 lovely white things you're looking at. Nightmare. But I was looking at the green fly because you have to go close. You're looking at the plant. And then I realised there was green fly there, but they weren't going to strip the plant. You'd have a few plants. Yeah. Rather than go in with soft soap, which is my normal thing, go in with soft soap and take them out, I realised that just let them live. They were okay. And the roses were absolutely fine anyway. So I'm much less fanatical about maintaining my garden exactly. You know, the odd weed, the odd butterfly or you know, whitefly, blackfly, scale insect even. I'm just a bit less panicking about it because nature will find a way. You know, as long as there's a balance.
But we were talking earlier, John, about the fact that during this period where we haven't been flying all over the world and driving everywhere, we've kind of, you were saying, we've pressed the rewind button slightly, and I think we've all got to be really careful that we don't just jump back straight to exactly what we were doing and reevaluate how we garden. And I've definitely noticed people are more relaxed, as Hannah was saying. They're more forgiving. They're less stressed about the look of the garden. We've got another question here that sort of links in with this. My brassicas have been decimated by whitefly and blackfly. What's the best organic control? That's Fiona in Hereford. I think we'll go to Terry.
I find it rather strange. The brassicas are attacked by blackfly because that's not their normal location. They go for the softer beans and something they can get their teeth into. But this whitefly, brassica whitefly, suddenly developed about 5 years ago. I'd never heard of brassica whitefly. Right. And then suddenly, about 5 years ago, it appeared on some of a winter crop, and they now take over. And again, one of the problems with the brassica whitefly, it doesn't breed young. It lays eggs. Now, when you go greenfly and blackfly, they are live bearers. So once you get rid of the parent, you stop the next generation. But once you get rid of the parent with the whitefly, the other eggs are there, and then 2 days later, there's another generation. The only way, and we were on about letting live or not, but I don't let them live. They got no chance. And the only way I get rid of them, I got a pump-up sprayer. I put it on my back. I look a bit like Ghostbusters, and I go under the net, and I just put it on a direct jet. I turn the leaves over, and I wash them off, and then I soak the ground, and I watch them struggle and swim for a few minutes. They don't have much energy, and the poor devils die.
So what have you got in there? Just water or soapy water?
No, not
just
soap,
water?
Just water.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, because the soap is okay, but the danger of that is if the sun comes out, it does burn things. Yeah. So, and again, I don't like using anything which is not other than plain water. And if you do wash them off and you do soak them, and it's one of the problems of being an organic gardener, it takes much more time.
Yeah, of course it does.
You have to be vigilant and you have to attack early. And if you attack early, you control. And unfortunately, what we did over many years, we've wiped out all our allies.
Exactly.
We don't get the ladybirds. We don't get the overflies. The balance is gone. So until we can get the balance back, we've got to live with it, control it, and hopefully the balance will return at some stage.
Yeah.
Terry, you mentioned time there, and I think that's quite an interesting subject because we've all had time to spend more time weeding and we haven't turned to pesticides and insecticides. But do you believe that people should make more time for their gardening?
You can't make time. That's one thing. You're only given a certain amount per day. I think it's how you allocate your time. I've had people come in over years with allotments and giving it up and say, I haven't got time. You've got time to do what you desire in every working day. Okay, we all had busy lives, we've all worked, but when you've got some spare time, and you all get some, it's what you allocate that time to. If your prime passion is gardening and growing, you will allocate the time and you will do it. If your prime passion is to lean on the bar, you will lean on the bar. If your prime passion is to play golf, you will play golf. And you all find time to do things which are pleasurable. It depends what you classify as your number one pleasure.
But also, I mean, if you're in the garden, enjoying it, relaxing, it becomes your social space, doesn't it, John? So therefore, you're not going out so much, you're not consuming, you're not driving.
Well, yeah, I use my garden for pleasure, for relaxing. That's what it's all about. I did the design course, so all the Hannah did all that. She's a designer, and I just wanted to find out what designers thought and why they designed the way they designed. You know, to do with balance and symmetry or asymmetry and all that sort of stuff. I found all that out, and then I made my little garden's got little rooms in it where you can just absorb. The one thing we haven't talked about here, bizarrely, because I'm a Glasgow Rangers supporter, sympathiser, is green, the colour green. Yeah. The colour green is, I'm not going to get too technical here, but it's the central chakra of all the colours of the rainbow. It's the middle one, it's the balancing one between the higher thoughts and the lower emotions, the more guttural emotions. And it's right in the middle, and that's why when you walk into a green space, like a garden, it's relaxing. It can be funereal if it's too much of it, which is why gardeners, we introduce all these colours, but generally it's a relaxing environment. And that's my passion, is the creating of the environment. And it just so happens that my wife loves growing vegetables, so but there's an area for that as well. Some of my clients reckon that, that God made Waitrose for vegetables, and that's what they believe. Less so now, because they're starting to grow, because they have time in their garden. They're starting to grow and seeing the benefits of it. Because obviously, I read something this morning that the gardening reduces stress, which we all know. It reduces cortisol. There's a Dutch study that showed that it fights stress better than other leisure activities. And it was about this macrobacteria vaccae, which stimulates the serotonin. If you take a teaspoon of your garden soil, it contains 50 million microbes of bacteria, and some of those are actually good for you. I mean, it's like Prozac. These people are druggies out there doing this gardening. It is good for you mentally, and literally, it's proven that it is.
We've got a question from David from Worcestershire saying, which 3 qualities does a gardener need? And I think John's kind of summed it up, is that you need to be someone. I read a quote the other day that said, some people stand in the rain and they get wet, and others love, enjoying the sight of it. I mean, there are people that see beauty, aren't there? So I think if you're going to be a good gardener, you've got to have your eyes and ears and all your senses alert, and it's just got to be a passion. There are no rules, are there? There is no checklist.
No, and I think, and Terry alluded to it earlier, I think because of the changing climate, what we've got to be is more intuitive. We've got to be intuitive about our plants, about the way that we garden. It comes from within you rather than it being a textbook, even though we can learn. We're always learning because it's such a massive subject. We never know it all. But I think that's the thing for me, intuitive. Yeah,
and enjoy it's your garden, isn't it, ultimately?
That's right.
Terry?
I mean, the 3 qualities you need, particularly if you've got an allotments. First of all, you've got to have patience, because everything takes its time. You've got to have a sense of humour, because some things fail and you get rid of something chronic. And you've got to have the ability to bounce back. My father, I mentioned earlier, took me under his wing at 4. I took my first allotments at 11, and I used to plant things, and they didn't come up. And I'd go inside to him, because he was my wisdom, he was answered all my questions. I said to him, Dad, I put these in, they didn't come up. I know. He said, you did that wrong. I said, well, why didn't you tell me? He said, you've learned from your mistake. You'll never learn from your successes.
100%. No, absolutely right. Someone said to me once, and it was when I'd never, you just accept things in life. And this was seeds, when you put them in the ground, how do they know to grow out of the ground? And if you think about yourself buried in heaven forfend, but you're actually underground, how would you know? And I went and researched it. I'd been to college, I'd been to university, and I thought, wait a minute. I looked it up, and it was gravity that forms, the radical goes down and the shoot goes in the opposite direction. And just a simple thing like that. Now when I see a seed growing, it's just amazing. You think of the little battery, which the soil, all soil is a giant battery that we put things in, and this thing grows, and then it sucks the goodness out, and we try and put it back in, and then we take the crops. But it's such an all-consuming hobby, passion, and in my case, a job, that you can follow down. You can grow vegetables, you can design gardens. There is so much to learn, but I would just countenance, don't panic if you don't know a plant's name or you don't know how something grows. You've got the internet, which is the most amazing learning thing. I used to have to wait for the library to open, and still have some books from there, actually. It's 34 years ago. That'll be quite a bill. But now we have the internet, and we have that. But what we've got to do is stand outside and actually do it. Lots of people can talk about it, but actually the practicalities, and it has the reward of you have a beautiful garden, a beautiful space, beautiful vegetables, which you can share with those around you.
I mean, Hamish, on those lines, Hamish from Ledbury has asked, he's quite keen to become a professional gardener. Any advice? And I think really what John is saying is you need to be good at it at home. You need to maybe, if you just jobbing gardening, if that's what you want. It's not quite clear what he wants to do. But as John said, there's so many different avenues, aren't there? There's design, there's, there's a million things you can do in horticulture.
Can I just sum this? I was asked this very question. It may not apply exactly to Hamish at this moment, but it's quite simple. There are 3 things you should do, Hamish. Be punctual,
Yeah.
be nice to people, and be good at your job. That is it. Genuinely, that is it.
Oh, one more.
No.
You've got to have had a good breakfast. A hungry gardener
What's
is
a good
no
breakfast?
good.
What is a good breakfast? We've talked about this before.
Well, I'm a toast and jam. What about you, Terry?
I'm baking butty.
Yeah, Marmite. Actually, though, if I'm gardening all day or doing a big section of gardening, I will eat quite a lot.
Yeah. I think it's, when I started as a parks gardener, if you're hungry, you're useless, aren't you?
But that's the beauty of an allotment, you see, because the first thing I do in the summer is I go up and I pick a pocket full of peas. Oh. And as I'm walking around working, I'm popping those pods and eating those. Better than any sweet, better than any chewing gum. I know the beauty as well. I mean, as you get older, the memory isn't what it was. So when I stop for coffee, I then have to find where my trowel is so I can follow this trail of pea pods back to where I was working.
Brilliant. That's a good name for a book for you, Terry, A Pocket Full of Peas, isn't it? We've got a question from Shyla. She's aged 10, so we must answer this. Top 5 perennial vegetables, please, Terry, for her to grow.
There are not too many perennial vegetables.
No.
I mean, there are perennial spinach, which does quite well. There's the perennial onion, which is the Welsh onion, which is well done. I mean, the 2 other ones which I'm not fond of and don't grow are Globe artichokes and Jerusalem artichokes. You've got them. Any more?
Well, I'll tell you what I'd put in for here is soft fruit.
Yeah, which is
I know it says vegetables,
yeah,
but
that's what threw me. I mean, fruit are the perennial ones.
Yeah, go for fruit. I mean, it's always expensive. It tastes amazing. Coming up to September time, perfect time to plant it. Raspberries, currants, all sorts of things.
Blueberries outside the back door. I'm in a neutral soil, so I grow it in an ericaceous pot, quite a big pot as well. And there's nothing. It's lovely in the morning. Just going out and taking 3 or 4 plants, fighting off the blackbird, which has spotted it and is homing in, and having just a few in the morning. There is something about homegrown, even those alpine strawberries.
Yeah. Gorgeous.
It's a wonderful bonus to our job. I love that.
So Shyla really wants to go away from vegetables and go to fruit, because the vegetables which are perennial, in my opinion, are not worth growing. The only one that really does help you is the Welsh onion. But in terms of perpetual spinach and the artichoke family, they are not the best tasters. They're not the best vegetables. I'll probably upset a few gardeners out there now who love artichokes, but I'm not a fan of those. Yeah. So you go to your raspberries, go to your strawberries, go to your blackcurrants, go to your red currants. I mean, the other beauty these days, there are so many miniature apple trees, pear trees and that. You can grow in pots
grow them
in
anywhere
small
now.
Space.
So
So the flexibility for growing fruit is far greater than it ever was. You don't need a huge monster in the garden anymore to pick apples. You can pick them out of a small pot.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Right, well, I'm going to sweep us back to recycling quickly because we've got a few minutes left. So Justine from Much Markle, just up the road, she's got hundreds of plastic pots. How does she deal with them? I mean, I think a lot of us are in that. I've actually used all mine this lockdown. Hannah, what would you suggest?
I take mine back to a nursery, to a local nursery, and they all get reused. So actually, I haven't got any at the moment. So
Terry, what do you do?
Oh, I'm a hoarder. I'm terrible. I never get. Again, I don't tend to get many new ones. I don't tend to buy anything. I mean, I got deep pockets, and I've already found the bottom. So all these pots get reused. And the other thing, when they do get broken and everything, I find I grow a lot of pots in the home garden with flowers in. When I empty those out, I throw those old pots in the bottom and use them as drainage. So they never actually recycle anywhere. They stay somewhere there. So you can throw them, particularly if you've got the ceramic ones, they are great for drainage. But even the plastic ones crushed up in the bottom of a pot will help the drainage. So don't worry about it. I mean, again, as you say, this year, I always find, come around March, I can never get enough pots, I can never get enough trays, because you're in the full planting mode. And then come September, I can't get in the shed because I won't throw anything out either. So
I mean, the other thing that's been quite lovely is you drive around the countryside. I've seen lots of tables with help yourself to the tomato seed. You could do that with your pots, couldn't you? Help yourself to the pots.
It's an idea. I'm the same as Hannah. I take mine to the local garden centre because they just you know, you go and buy, you find plants, you want to buy a plant, you pot it up, they've got a tiny pot, and if you're not growing seedlings, if you're not continually growing stuff, most people that are home gardeners buy a pen stem and they have that pen stem and then it gets a bit big, then they might propagate it.
Yeah.
But maybe after 4 years, and that time they bought hundreds of other plants. I wouldn't panic about it. The garden centres take them at the moment, and it's such a shame, really, that we can't reuse them, and it's mad.
Well, it seems crazy when I think right back many, many moons ago, when you used to buy plants at some specialist nurseries, you would get them wrapped in newspaper, and you would mainly buy in the autumn, wouldn't you? And I remember speaking to someone that's now no longer here, who'd worked at garden centres, you know, many, many years ago. He said, we used to sell the plants in tin cans. I mean, I'm not suggesting we do that, but I think shopping local, if you go to a nursery and say, I don't want the pot, I'm going to wrap my plant in newspaper, I think that's something we can all do, isn't it?
Yeah, and the peat, let's do the peat thing.
Oh, yes.
Because, I mean, so many times I've been out to buy non-peat-based compost, or like John, I mean, for myself, I use my own. And I think we've got to get this message across. I would just love to see some of the big organisations just ban it completely, because it's wrong at every level.
You know, I call it at university, we went to someone that was harvesting peat, a massive company, and the chap, he was standing there next to his 200-litre bale there, a beautiful bale, but it was all tightly packed, and there was a guy there with a sod cutter on the cover, and I looked just behind that guy, and there was the biggest machine I've ever seen, with arms like 20 metres long each side, carving up this field. And he said, oh, it's no problem, we're going to plant some trees. And he picked the wrong group of students, because we were all in our second year at Edinburgh University, and we just tore up to shreds. We could 10,000 years it's going to take to get all this back. And he said, we're going to put a few trees in. And it was so, that was the way it was then. It just was. Peat was the best thing. People recommended it. In the Gardener's World all recommend. We've wised up now, and we should learn from that and move a bit quicker. But growing your own is the answer. Just make your own compost. Yeah.
So as we come to the end, we've got one more question from Jenny in Newbury. I don't want to forget you, Jenny. How do you deal with bindweed? I mean, to me, my mind, it's just perseverance, isn't it?
No, it's move.
Move house.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with ground elder.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mine's cardboard again. So if you go, I've recently moved house, so I've got a new garden, massive area of ground elder and some bindweed.
Oh, yeah.
So lots and lots of cardboard straight on the top of the soil, mulch on top of it, and just let it slowly rot down.
Yeah.
And you cut the light out, you will get rid of it.
The advantage of bindweed is one of the easiest weeds to find, because the root is so white.
Yeah.
The trouble is, you only got to leave a centimetre and you've got the same problem.
Yeah.
The worst place for bindweed is against perennial crops or fruit bushes. 'Cause once it's in the roots, you just got a hell of a job to get rid of it.
I mean, I find hedges are the real problem. If you get anything like that in a hedge,
Can't get it
you'll
out.
never get it out.
No.
All you've got to do is just enjoy the fact that you're pulling it out. You know, ground elder, what did the Romans ever do for us? Treatment for gout? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And the bindweed, I used to use chemicals to pull it out and train it up a bamboo cane and all this sort of stuff. But life's just too short.
Yeah.
And I just pull it out wherever I see it. And you just got to persevere.
But it's a beautiful flower.
It is
It's a
beautiful.
Stunning.
I had a little story somewhere. I had a friend of mine who said to me, he'd bought a trellis and he wanted to know what to grow a bit.
Oh, yeah.
So I said to him, he wanted a scent as well. So I said to him, get a honeysuckle. Anyway, about 2 months later, so how's the honeysuckle doing? He says, died, he said. Oh, God. He said, I said, what else can I grow? It'll grow and be permanent. I said, try a trailing English rose, something will give you a bit of scent. And 2 months later, he's died, he said. I said, well, I run out of ideas. Oh, don't worry, sir. He said, it looks brilliant now. He said, it's covered in these dark green leaves and white flowers.
Excellent. Lovely.
But a bindweed had taken over and he was quite happy.
Do you know,
So
in the
it's-
right position, I've got field bindweed, it's growing around, it's got little pink bits on it and it's stunning. And just let it be. But where it's in a place you don't want it in your vegetable plot or climbing up your soft fruit, take it out. But just don't panic.
Yeah.
Just don't panic.
Yeah.
It's Maresdale. I mean, people go on and on about Maresdale. It's a lovely looking plant.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Well, as you can see, we could talk for a long, long time. We haven't even made it a quarter of a way through the list. But it's been fascinating just getting all our different views. And I think if there's one thing that we should do, I mean, my big thing is recycling. Hannah, what would you say is your big thing?
I think I want to end on a positive note that however big your garden is, however small your garden is, you can make a difference to the planet. Plant pollinators.
Terry?
And again, what you use when you've got it, use again and again. That is I'm a staunch allotment here, and I said earlier, what's on the plot stays on the plot, and it's all recycled internally. There is no miles on it, and again, the food then has no miles on it, and it gets it at its freshest, and you know exactly what you're eating. No pesticides, no chemicals. They are not needed. They just need perseverance.
Brilliant. And John?
Wow. What was the question again?
So one thing that you'd like people to take away from today that you would...
Don't panic. Don't panic. Nature will do its thing. The temperature's going to rise and things are going to fry and things are... I've got a rowan tree that at the moment its leaves are curled up. Use technology. If anyone has got a pest or a disease that they don't know in their garden, why not, if you're a member of, say, the Royal Horticultural Society, send it off. I used to send all my client stuff there. But what I'd do was I'd put the name of me, so it looked like I had the most poisonous area in the country.
Stay well away.
You're the RHS scientific people. Gloucestershire, this place is alive. And then I met one of the ladies when I was doing some judging there, and she said, don't ever do that. Tell me where it is. Because when you do that, you tell them where a leaf... perhaps a box blade disease, where that's coming from, the oak processionary moth. When you tell them, they put it down. You don't realise you're part of this. This world is our backyard. This is all our garden. It might not, your next door's garden's not yours, but it sort of is. So it's trying to just enjoy it and don't panic. That's all I'm saying.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, panellists, for joining me, and thank you to Helen's Garden Festival for putting on this live event. And we've had some really wonderful questions, actually, from some young people, which is really exciting. So, yes, do spread the word. If you've watched this and enjoyed it, encourage your friends to visit the YouTube channel and have a watch for themselves. So thank you very much, and happy gardening to you all.